Good afternoon and welcome to the September 27th, 2023 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this virtual meeting format. For work sessions like this one where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And thank you again for joining us. With that, I call this September 27th, 2023 meeting to order, and I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, right before City Council went on break in the summer, we had made some changes to your operating agreements. This is something we like to periodically do, make sure that everything that you're using to operate is kind of in line. And when you did that, you brought up a couple of other topics you wanted to address. And so Katie's here to introduce those and walk us through it. And then it'll be followed by, and you can probably just roll into it, the second part of that, which is your agreements around intergovernmental relations. And Ethan will be here to present that. So we're here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to share my screen. Just getting everything ready, sorry. All right. As Sarah mentioned, this work session is a continuation of Council's discussion from 7/19 related to your operating agreements and processes. And there were two topics at that 7/19 work session that generated a lot of interest from councilors in revisiting this fall. The first one is related to your boards and commissions recruitment process. And the second one is related to council's operating agreements, specifically public forum participation. So that's how I've divided the presentation up, and we will be going through the process for boards and commissions, as well as some data points for you to consider to help council have its discussion. So we're going to start off with boards and commissions recruitment process because the next cycle of recruitment is actually starting pretty soon. So if council does desire to make changes to that process, it would be good for us to know in advance before that process starts. I'm going to first walk you through the basic process for recruitment and the timeline associated with it. This is going to correspond to attachment C in your packet. And I just want to highlight before I start going through these, the yellow sections on this timeline relate kind of specifically to your current practices in attachment B, which we're going to cover on the next slide. And this is also where council will find that they have the most flexibility to either make adjustments or pilot new processes. So we start off in January, confirming all of the vacant positions, and recruitment is going to begin. We usually keep recruitment open for 30 days, so we'll see that end sometime in February. Once the CMO has completed all of its verifications, the applications will go to council and mayor, and you do receive them all. If there's something specified in code, like a review committee that needs to look at the applications as well, because they're providing recommendations to either council or mayor, we would be providing the applications to those groups. Also in March, the council would be receiving all of those applications and then filling out interview ballots. Council does receive a summary of those interview ballots. And then related to the interview ballots, if applicants receive 4 or more interview ballots, they're invited to interview. If an incumbent receives 5 or more, they actually move on to the nomination process. So in the April-May timeframe, we would be hearing from candidates. They would be giving their 3-minute statements, and then council would be filling out their nomination ballots. Similar to the interview process, applicants with 4 or more nomination ballots, we actually put their name into the proposed motion, and any incumbents that received 5 or more interview ballot nominations would be going into the proposed motion. Council and mayor are provided a summary of all of the nominations, and then we publish that summary in the meeting packet and post it online for the public. The council would also be taking action related to appointments via motion and vote. And then in June, we're sending out appointment letters to folks and getting everyone ready for their appointments to begin on July 1. So the next piece I kind of want to talk you through is the attachment B of your packets, which is the appointment matrix. This is actually going to go into more detail. So that slide we just covered is really just a high-level overview of the process. The appointment matrix is actually going to go through each board or commission, your standing advisory groups, and it's going to cover the following pieces of information. So the first 3 columns are very basic. The first column is the name of the advisory group. The second column relates to the authority, what code, ORS, or charter section gave that group its authority. The third column is the number of members associated with that group. Columns 4 through 6 actually cover the interview selection process. And I broke it out into those different columns because I wanted to be able to show where code specifically requires specific steps versus council's current practice. And although all of the steps are subject to change by council, the code requirements would take more steps to change than current practice. The columns 7 through 9 cover the nomination process, and they are organized in a manner similar to the previous 3 columns. So they're meant to be read as kind of a subgroup together. So you're reading from left to right, which is why some start off as, an item 1, and then you move into the next column and it's step 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the 10th column is the length of term and any term limitations. Just some notes I'd like to kind of highlight related to the appointment matrix. Code does require for specific groups that mayor nominate and council appoint, but council still receives all applications to review for the appointment process. Also, code requirements have for specific groups that membership include members from other advisory groups. And this is something that councilors have raised in the past, questions about membership on more than one group. So kind of moving into some notes about current practice, I just wanted to help facilitate the conversation today to let everyone know that there are currently 2 individuals participating on more than one group that are not representing their original seat on another board, commission, or committee. Other current practices I'd just like to highlight. So the 4 or more ballot practice for interviews, that process, is just a current practice that's not outlined somewhere specific in code. And then we follow a similar practice for nominations where if an applicant receives 4 or more nominations, we're adding their name into the motion. If the applicant doesn't receive or if any application receives less than 4, for the nominations that actually we provide a summary to the council president, and they would be making a decision as to which name goes into the motion. And then the last piece, we've had some questions about where this information is provided. And so we just wanted to reiterate that nominations are published as part of the appointments packet. So I'm going to do a hard transition to operating agreements. So the other topic that generated a lot of interest from council during that 719 work session is related to public forum participation. So the next few slides will have some data points for council. I just want to note that over the past few years, council has actually made quite a few changes to their public forum process, either through pilots or formal adoption of changes. And so to help council understand how those changes have been working, I have data from public forum data from 2022 and 2023 to share. So first, we're going to start off with public forum participation data. The 2 charts cover all of last year's public forum participation and this year's through August. The graph bars in blue indicate the total testimonies given, which would include whenever a repeat speaker spoke. The graphs in yellow show the number of unique speakers that came to council. So in this graph, we would only be showing the repeat speaker or the repeat speakers only counted once. In 2022, there were 20 public forums for an average of 25.8 speakers per forum. And in 2023, we've had, as of August, 13 public forums with the average of 16 speakers per public forum. And those averages will be helpful as we move into the next slide. So the other piece of information we thought would be useful for council as part of this conversation is to kind of delve into the 90-minute time limit. So for the past year and a half, I broke this up into quarters. So you'll see that in the columns. And then for the rows, I'll go into each one to kind of explain what happened here. So the first row is times the speaker list was over 34 people or there's 34 people or more. And the reason it comes out to 34, if you do the math, 2.5 minutes at 90 would be 36 speakers. But if you take into account the fact that we allow for 5 seconds of overage time for people to finish up their thought, transition time between speakers, and the occasional technical issue, it's actually a little bit less than that we can kind of guarantee that somebody can speak. So when we hit 34 and every sign up after that, it becomes a little less likely that the individual would get to speak. So within the last year and a half, we had 6 instances where the speaker list was more than 34 people. The next row talks about the time limit when we actually reached 90 minutes. And that's actually only happened once in the past year and a half. And the one time that we did reach the 90-minute limit, the number of speakers that did not get to testify was 20. So because I'm sure someone will ask the question, that one time was the Monday before council's special meeting to consider the middle housing ordinance. So we had quite a few people show up for the public forum before that ordinance was adopted to talk about it. And that is the data that I have to share. Mayor, I can turn it back over to you for any questions.
Thank you. And I would ask, I'm having a little trouble with my computer, but if counselors could turn on their cameras, then you'll show up at the top of my screen, and that will help me a little bit. But thank you for walking through that. And then I will be totally dependent on people using their little raised hands to know whether you are wanting to speak. So I appreciate this overview, and I see that Alan is ready to speak. So Alan, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks for that overview, Katie. On the last slide, you didn't happen to do average length of time for the forums, did you? So we know how long they've actually been taking. I know only one went over 90 minutes, but
I didn't.
60-minute time frame.
Yeah, I didn't do that calculation. If that's something that council's interested in, we could do that.
It'd be interesting. I think I would be interested in seeing how many of forums actually went over 60 minutes. I think it's probably not very many.
Yeah, if you do the average, as I kind of outlined, for 25.8 speakers per public forum in 2022, and then right now we're averaging 16 speakers in public forum for 2023. So I could get some rough numbers, and then I could do more actual numbers based on how many speakers we had.
Ooh, on the fly math?
not on the fly math. I could get that to you.
Right, that's why we have computers. And Mayor, I had a motion that I sent out earlier. I don't know when that's appropriate time to bring that up.
Yeah, let's, I would like to see if others have comments or questions about the board and commissions in particular, because that is time sensitive. So if the council wants to make adjustments to that, we need to really address that first. So, Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks. So I had a question. I wasn't around when the Sustainability Commission was created, but I'm wondering what it has always made me wonder why it's different from all the other commissions. Why do counselors appoint someone? I find that weirdly irregular and difficult. So I'm just wondering, what is the point of having it be different? From staff's groups, like, I don't know if you know from back then.
I don't have that information with me, Counselor. I could definitely look into that though.
It's possible that Alan could share information on that because he was involved in that discussion. Alan, do you have?
Yeah, it was actually my motion to create the Sustainability Commission. And actually, Jennifer, that's actually a throwback to the way it used to be. And then it got changed, and that's going backwards. So it used to be that, for instance, a lot of the boards and commissions, including the budget committee, were selected each individual counselor, and it got changed on the budget committee to being citywide. On the Sustainability Commission, it felt like each commission or each counselor needed its own say when I wrote that motion, and we talked about it. Not at length, but we talked about it when we were discussing the creation of the Sustainability Commission, and each commission and each counselor felt like they wanted to have their own person on there to represent maybe a different point of view. So that's why that ended up being different. But it was kind of back to the future.
Thanks, Alan. That's actually helpful. So taking that in consideration, in the sense that it sounds like we've moved away from that kind of a format, I don't know how other people feel, but it feels like it's not necessary and potentially inappropriate to have one commission that is so very different than all the others. But obviously that is just my opinion. But for staff, I find it very difficult to find an appropriate person to appoint that is just not someone I already know who might be in the circle. Like, my ability to find someone with having diverse options for me to choose from is very difficult, because there's no like platform available. So maybe there's a way we can build this into the other process that we already do, because otherwise I'm like, Facebook, like my options are very limited, and I find that not acceptable. So I don't know, maybe staff has some ideas of how we could do that better.
Yeah, Counselor Ye, one of the things that I think we've talked about in the past is making the applications available to you from the folks who have applied in the past who were not selected, so that they have an interest in serving on that specific commission. I don't know if that was provided to you in this last round,
No.
but that's definitely something that we could do.
Yeah, I was aware of that, but I'm wondering if we know a seat is going to be empty or it's empty, maybe we could be more deliberate on letting folks know, the whatever ward seat is open, and it might encourage folks from that area. I know we're not required to pick someone, but it might encourage someone from that area to be like, oh, they're specifically looking for someone from my area. For some of the wards that tend to get fewer applicants, that might encourage someone.
We could we've done interim recruitments before, and we could follow a similar process to what we do for the annual recruitment process, where it's advertised and the application becomes open. So there would be some ways to follow a similar process to what the standard is, but maybe out of sync with annual recruitment, because those ones tend to not fall into the annual recruitment process timeframe.
Okay, thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry for the strangeness with the camera and everything else. I got a new computer here, and I'm experiencing some user competency issues. I guess if it's going to come as a motion at some point, I would feel exactly opposite to my friend Jennifer. I think that that we see boards and commissions represented by certain geographical areas of town considerably more so than other parts of town. I don't think that's an arguable point. I mean, statistically, that's been the case for a while. And if anything, I think the process of counselors doing appointments in some board and commission cases for their appointment, as opposed to the group's appointment, has merit as at least a discussion from here, whether or not we should consider that. I'd like to see us consider that again as the method by which we choose folks for budget committee at least, and maybe planning commission as well. But my point of view is we see much more participation from some parts of town than from others. And I don't think that's so much a voluntary choice, so much as the message we send out to the community. So that's my point of view on it.
Okay, thank you. Emily.
Thank you. I'm on the Sustainability Commission and have been for some years, and we don't have a full slate because counselors, for whatever reason, don't suggest anybody. So from my point of view in that one, I'd rather have them be all at large the way we do the others. We do have the wards listed on our applicants. Yeah, it's not distributed evenly, but it's not going to be distributed evenly if everybody doesn't appoint somebody. And because it doesn't have to be in the ward, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be evenly distributed, because my appointee was not in my ward. So I'm sorry, Mike, but I disagree.
Okay, I have Alan for a kind of a second round. I don't know if anyone else has questions or comments here. All right, Alan, take it away.
Yeah, I was kind of remiss on the recounting of what we did back in, I think it was 2008 or so, in creating the Sustainable Commission. After that conversation, we actually ended up doing a hybrid where we each had 8 counselors selecting an individual, but then we had 4 at large. So it's a hybrid system of 4 at large. So, and then there's 1 counselor on it. So that's the 13 voting members, because it needs to be odd. And I guess, Jennifer, there's nothing to stop a counselor from using the last list of open at-large candidates and looking through that, or waiting until the next recruitment that we do on an annual basis and throwing in award-specific application process and letting people use that process to generate a list of people other than the ones that you already listed. In fact, when I just appointed someone, and Katie provided me the list of all the people that had applied for the at-large seats. So that was helpful.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sensing that anyone is seeking to take action to change how things are done with the Sustainability Commission. Are there, and I know Alan has a motion, so if we're finished with that discussion, I'll let Alan put his motion on the table, and then you all can discuss that. Alan, you're still muted.
Couple more years and I'll get this right. I move to limit any individual to only 1 appointed city council board or commission at a time, not including the liaison positions identified in the city code.
Second.
And what I mean by liaison positions is, like, for instance, on the police commission, we have a human rights commissioner and a CRB, which are both standing committees, but they're not appointed by council. They're selected by the different boards to represent at the police commission. That's an example of a liaison, and those are specified in code. And can I speak to it, Mayor?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just feel like when we get these and we have so many people applying for these different boards and commissions, that when we appoint this one person to two, it leaves out people from being able to participate. So I think we should try to expand as much participation from the citizens of Eugene as we possibly can, and this is one way to do that by limiting one person to one committee. And there are people that are on two because of the liaison things, but I think it just maximizes the amount of participation we get from our citizens. And in fact, we have had, I think, Katie, we have two people that are on two boards, and we've had that in the past too. So this has come up several times, and I'd like to see it more formalized in that we only want to see one person on one committee and maximize the amount of people we get to be involved in boards and commissions.
Okay, Matt and then Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. And Alan, thanks for floating this motion. I'm supportive of the concept, and I appreciate the clarification in the email to council that this does not apply to the several liaison committee positions that are selected by committees and not by council. I am cautious about the language being misinterpreted that the mayor's appointees would be limited. And so I wonder if there's an opportunity for clarification that would include language in that last clause, or that's all one clause, but if the language was to limit any individual to only one appointed council, board, or commission at a time, not including city council liaison positions identified in city code. I'm happy to vote that as a friendly, if you think it already, if you think it's already clear by identifying in city code, if you think that language is clear enough, then I can live with that. But just reading it or just trying to absorb it, I don't know if that sends if that captures your intent to not limit the mayor and council participating in multiple boards or commissions or committees.
Are you talking about counselors?
Correct.
Oh, yeah. No, this is just citizens. So that's
I'm aware.
the intent.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm aware of that, but I don't
Okay.
know if that intent would live on if we didn't clarify that piece before adopting it.
Well, is there a better word to use than individuals? Non-council citizens of Eugene, or I'm not sure. I think the legislative intent's pretty clear after this conversation that it's not intended to be about counselors. And as to doubling up with mayor's appointments, the mayor appointments, if they're appointed, if the mayor nominates and we appoint, then they're appointed by the council. So they would be covered in here because they would be appointed by council. But if the mayor just has the right to appoint, then they would not be, if that's helpful. And the word turns out, ask Catherine Brotherton, liaisons doesn't actually occur in the code. It's just the word that we use and that we've used for years as the person that is a liaison to another committee, that the committee, because we want to cross-fertilization of ideas and representation. So we created the liaisons, but it's actually not a word that gets used in the code.
Okay, thank you. Randy and then Emily.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Alan, for making this a motion. I agree with it. My only concern would be for a board such as the Toxics Board, which people don't seem to be breaking down the door to serve on that group. If we can't find anybody else, I would certainly hate to cut off an avenue with people that might be willing to serve. But at the same time, I'm not offering a friendly. I like it as stands. And in regard to my colleague, Councilor Keating, you're right. I mean, if we were limited to one group, none of us would get past the budget committee. So, that's kind of, I think, speaks for itself there. But I also understand when we change language that sometimes, a new set of interpretations are formed around that language. So it might be worth putting something in there that just makes sure there's a firewall between community members who volunteer and city councilors, which that's part of our job to serve on these boards, commissions, and committees. And I believe that's all I have at this point. Again, thank you for the thought going behind this. I really, I was ready to make some kind of a motion myself until I saw what you put forward, Alan. Thanks.
I see the city attorney has stepped in, and so I think it'd be helpful just to clarify. I mean, councilors are not nominated for boards and commissions. I appoint you. And so you don't go through this process. So I don't know that clarifying language is really necessary, but and maybe the city attorney has something else to say about that.
I agree with you, Mayor. I think because of just the process, there isn't a process like the appointment process involving council for the councilors and to serve on these committees. If there is a general desire to have some clarifying language, I think the language that Councilor Groves used of a committee or a community volunteer in place of individual could be appropriate language if there's a desire to do that.
Or maybe just tack on to the end, not including liaison positions identified in city code or city councilors.
Yeah.
Do that too.
Yep, absolutely.
I'd take that as a friendly, Matt, if you want to make that. I don't even second it.
Yeah, I seconded the motion, so thank you.
Okay, Emily. Oh, yeah, Emily, and then Lindsay.
Thank you. What happens if, can you only apply for one committee then? Because you might have a lot of energy for two different subjects, and if you only apply for one and don't get it, then we've lost that volunteer's work. I do look at who's applying for both and sometimes just pick the one I think they'd be more suited for. So I'm not sure how we could make that happen, but I hate to discourage people if they can't apply for two. Counselors can be on two. I was on human rights and sustainability at the same time. Both times, liaison from council could vote. Liaisons from other committees were only there to listen and bring a report back to their commission. A couple of other things. You have to be a citizen to apply. I wouldn't want to put that word in there if you don't have to be. Something that bothers me is that people who don't live in the city sometimes apply, and it bothers me. I think that you should live within the city. We have to live within the wards. It's not in that leverage position. So these are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Katie, did you have a clarification?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Councilor Simple, I actually had a good conversation with Sarah McKinney about this because we figured if this did go through, we would have to find some way to let the individuals applying know that they can apply for more than one, but they can only be appointed to one, as well as we would have to stand up a new process during the appointments meeting where it was clear, to you, if you're appointing the person for this group, they can't be considered for an appointment, that follows. So we know that there would need to be a little bit more structure to that to make sure that everyone is clear about the appointment process at the beginning, during the application, as well as you counselors as you're doing the actual appointments.
It looks like the city attorney has something to say about that too.
Well, and I just wanted to respond to the question about being within city limits. Right now, what the code provides is this within the city's urban growth boundary. So if that's a change that the council is interested in making, that would just need to be a code amendment.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely appreciate the motion and the thought behind the motion, but I don't think I support it today. I think, we have who I want to see on our boards and commissions are people who have the right set of skills, the right set of experiences, and the capacity to serve. And if a person fits those things for more than one board, we may limit the success of that group by not allowing someone to serve on more than one. That being said, I also recognize that as we vote for people, we may be more likely to choose someone that we already know and have served with on other boards and commissions. And so I see that there could be this kind of bias in who we know versus who might be the best skill set. So I don't think I support the limitation, but would appreciate that conversation a little bit more during the appointment process of, is this person the right fit, and do they really have that capacity, and be asking those questions for them. So thank you.
I know Alan has a hand raised for another round, but I just want to kind of following on what Lindsay just said, but also just as a sort of a process question, when I am going through a process with my particular recommendations, I do pay attention to whether people have applied to a number of other possible boards and commissions. And so I do try to take that into account, but there is duplication. So I guess I don't know whether there's a sort of a discipline around looking once all of those nominations are in and once I've made my suggestions, since I'm doing that outside it in advance of the time when you're all doing this voting, and separately, just thinking about council's process in terms of looking at the whole slate across all of the commissions. And I don't know if there's a process for discussing that. I mean, it adds on to what Lindsay has just said about you're doing a little trading off between, is someone better off on the police commission or on the budget committee? How are you evaluating that? So I don't know if others have thoughts. Alan.
Yeah, couple points. So I think, Emily, to the word citizens, we're not adding that in. We're just adding in a comma at the end, comma, or city councilors, so that they're not included. So citizens isn't in there. I would object on the same grounds as you. Secondly, this only relates to the appointment process, not to the application process, just to make that perfectly clear, but it's only about appointments. I too do what you do, which is I look and see, and I usually pick which one I think that would be best on, and I usually don't nominate people for two different things. But that needs to be more formalized if this passes and notice more clearly done. But I would point out that when staff does this, they put asterisks next to names of people who apply to more than one, and then the footnote usually tells which ones they applied to, so you can cross-reference that and see which ones they've applied to and make that judgment on your own. And as far as I'm concerned, the capacity, one's more than enough usually for folks, especially if they have lives and they're busy. And I guess the overriding benefit to this from my perspective is that we get more people participating in government, which is really what I think this is about.
Hey, thank you. Emily.
Thank you. I agree. I would like to have more people participating, and I would like to not have people be on two commissions, although from personal experience of many of us who can do that. But I I don't want to limit the interviews. So if I think they might be good on both, or I think they might be good on one, then I might not get to interview them, which might tell me I'd rather have them on the committee I might not have voted for the first time. So I'm not sure how we do that. I'd like at the appointment process that people don't get doubled up, but I don't want to prevent somebody from getting an interview, even if we allow them to apply to more than one commission.
Okay, but I'm understanding,
Good
and maybe
question.
Alan wants to, but what I'm understanding is you can nominate, it's the appointment process that this is regulating, not the nomination process. So you can nominate someone for several commissions, but when council is voting, what council is saying is they would not appoint one person to two things. So you'll still have your deliberative voting process on appointments, but you can put someone in who has applied for, you can nominate someone who has applied for more than one commission. You just, at the end of the day, council is not, if this goes through, council would not appoint one person to two commissions.
But we do take a vote on who we're going to interview.
Right.
So we're going to allow people to apply for two. And then when it comes to the appointment process, we do it in a certain order. So that could be difficult to, oh my gosh, well, I want them to serve and they've applied for budget, so I'll put them on that. But now, even if I thought they'd be better on human rights, I can't.
Right.
I think, though, we could figure out a process, as Katie was mentioning earlier. I think about things like in union negotiations where you sort of come up with your tentative agreements and you kind of work your way through it. And there's probably a way to do it, and we can play through that.
It's hard to vote for something when you don't know what the end result's going to be.
Right. Right. And frankly, Emily, this is the position I'm always in when I'm making appointments, because I don't know how the other appointments are going to play out for council. I mean, when I'm making my recommendations. Yeah, Alan, another thought?
Yeah, well, I actually thought of that, and I thought it would actually change the way that we do things in the voting process for those infrequent times where people have been interviewed and they're up for two different ones. We'd have to segregate them out and make a decision about which one are they going to be on, if any. And so we'd have to treat those doubling ups in a different fashion, and I think staff can help figure that out for us. So we wouldn't end up like picking one and then coming back later and saying, well, I thought they would be better over here. Right. You know, when it's, you know, that's the fourth time. We do it up front and figure out where that person should land. So it doesn't create a problem. Then we'd be informed when that position comes up.
Okay, I see both Lindsay and Emily. So Lindsay and then Emily.
Yeah, quick question. So term limits are going to kind of run into one another at times. So someone serving on one commission could be applying to another commission where they would be potentially serving on more than one for a short time, and then is that ever something that happens?
So we do get folks who reapply knowing that their term limit is going to be up. And we have seen folks who are on one commission who apply to be on another once the application period is open. That would just be another calculation that we have to do. We would be looking at when their term limit on the current one ends and when they would be starting the new one. It would have to be a factor in the conversation.
Okay. I wouldn't want to limit someone if that overlap was the consideration or the thing that kept them from being able to apply for a different commission. And then to speak to capacity, I think every single one of us has busy lives and a lot of different things going on. We're all on multiple commissions, jobs, council, commissions. I think that if someone says they have capacity, then that should be enough to believe that they do. That's all.
Okay, Emily.
I would like to have people not serve on 2 commissions, but until we figure out how, I can't vote for it. Another question is, why does council select some and the mayor select others? What's the reasoning of why council can't pick who's on the police commission?
So council does appoint the mayoral nominations. Mayor is for the standing committees we're talking about, mayor is nominating, but council receives all applications and council does the final appointments. So you could select someone other than who mayor put forward as her nomination. In terms of how the code is written, I don't know if I can speak to why certain ones received the designation. There's a line, I can't think of the code line right now, but there's a line that says, you know, unless it specifically says differently, this is how it's done. So I could pull that one out and share that if that would be helpful, but I don't know if I have the historical context to know all of why some of them are council interviews and appoints and why some mayor nominates and council appoints.
Well, in my 7 years, I've never seen us nominate someone other than the mayor's suggestion. Feels disrespectful almost to do that. And so I would like to know why the different commissions are interviewed differently, because I don't see police commission as really all that different from anything except planning commission. And I do wish we had a more strenuous application for planning because they have so much more power.
Yeah, I will just say, without having without having charter language in front of me or anything, but I think the police commission goes through a process. It's a more robust process in that those commissioners actually do interviews, and then based on their interviews, they make recommendations to me. And then if I need to interview again, I do that. So that's a different structure. I don't know how that emerged. I think with the other two, El Rapa and Willamette, they are more intergovernmental. They're across agencies, and so they're separate from just solely advisory to council. And I think that's why the mayor is in that role. But good question. Okay, I think if there's no other discussion, we're ready for a vote. And because I can't see everybody on my screen, I would like you to use your little digital hand for the vote as well. And so all in favor of the motion on the table, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? I'm waiting for hands to go down. Opposed? 2. Okay, so that passes 6-2. Thank you very much. And I think with that, we're ready to move on to the IGR discussion. So I guess I'll turn that back to
Mayor. Wasn't that an amendment? Alan's amendment and not the final motion?
That was the motion. Did I lose track? I thought that was the motion.
I would have voted against the motion and in favor of Alan's amendment. And I don't believe we had the final vote on the motion, but just Alan's amendment. I'm looking at Alan right now.
I thought that was a friendly. I thought he was just a friendly of the word change, adding city councilors.
I have a note, Mayor, that it was a friendly.
Yeah, it was just a friendly. So I think we just voted on the main motion.
My vote is no on the main motion. I apologize for the confusion.
Okay. All right, that's okay. So it still passes 5-3.
The only difference in the motion was at the end, Mike, it said comma or city councilors, so there wasn't any confusion that councilors be on more than one committee.
Yeah, forgive me. I thought that Matt had made the friendly and yours was an amendment to the actual motion on changing boards and commissions, or on the process that was put in front of us. But yours was the only motion to change the process. Forgive me.
Yeah, and the friendly was just to add or count city councilors.
Right.
Is that so that you're a yes vote or no vote?
I'm a yes vote on the change of yours. If we're going to vote at some point in the future on the presentation that Katie made with regard to the process as a whole, are we doing that or no?
That's what today's work session was about, was to allow you to have a conversation about if you want to change that process up again. And so Councilor Zelenka introduced a motion
Right,
of here's
the
something I
motion.
want to change. And if you have something you want to change, this would be the time to do it.
Thank you. I'll just say I do, but I noticed from my presentation of it in the first place in July that I don't believe there's enough votes at the table to alter it the way I would like. But I would change the way that we do nominations with regard to how we vote outside of a council meeting. And I don't think that's a good idea, but I don't see that's going to come to a vote. So be it.
Okay, Emily, you have a hand raised.
Are we going to talk about our regular rules or just the boards and commissions today?
You have an opportunity to talk about any of your regular rules. That Katie gave a presentation about the public forum and the data on that. If there's this, as Sarah just said, this is your moment. If there's something else you want, we want to take care of boards and commissions because it's time sensitive, but you can open up the box on other issues.
Yeah, we went through all of the things that you had talked about previously, presented that, and you just recently voted to put all of that into place. But during that conversation, you said, hey, we'd like to come back and revisit boards and commissions in the public forum. So this would be an opportunity to put a couple of things in place, and then we'll bring you a new resolution. Otherwise, it'll roll until like another quarter or break comes by, and we'll periodically at least visit it once a year.
Okay, well, my two concerns are, I would like to see public hearings be 2.5 minutes because we don't have a 90-minute limit. I'm not really interested in the 90-minute limit, but we would get more people in if we had 2.5 minutes. And I think the 2.5 minutes has worked really well for forum. I've been able to get the gist of what everybody's been saying. The other thing, that I'm not sure how we will change, but the way we mix up the seats, we just switch sides. And I love sitting next to Alan and Greg, but I do not get to sit next to Jennifer or Lindsay or Mike. And I think that's a disadvantage.
Okay, so you are, I mean, you're free to open that discussion, or
I'm willing to let it wait, but I do want it on the record that those are things I'm very concerned about. But I know it's almost 1 o'clock and we have another topic.
Okay.
So I'd like to come back to that sooner than later.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Alan, one more comment, and then I do want to move on to IGR.
Yeah, I was just going to say I would support a motion to have 2.5 minutes at public hearings as well. So if you want to bring that back, I would second it, Emily. I think
just do it now and get it over with.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation.
And just one more before you do that. The seating arrangement's actually specified in the rules, and it's just a rotation. So I think eventually you'll sit next to everybody if you stay long enough. It's by
I've
quarter,
been here
right?
for 7 years, and I don't think it's worked out since we came back from the pandemic. Rules are rules, but it's our job to change them when necessary. I make a motion that we change the public hearing length of testimony to 2.5 minutes instead of 3.
Second.
And just for clarification, the motion is that it will return on a consent agenda to approve the resolution making that amendment.
That would be fine.
All right, it's been seconded. Any discussion of that? All in favor, please raise your digital hand for me. 1, 2, 3, 4. I count 5 in favor. Opposed? Wait a second. I only see 1 opposed and I only got 5 in favor. So,
Counselor Evans.
Mayor,
raised his
my
hand.
hand was sticky.
okay. So you're in favor?
Favor, yes.
Yeah, and I am too. I couldn't
Okay.
get my
All right.
digital hand up.
All right. Okay, super. So I got 7 in favor, 1 opposed. And so that passes. That's excellent. Thank you very much. And then with that, I think let's turn on to the next item, the IGR. And are we turning this manager, you introducing this? Or
I think you can just roll right to Ethan.
roll right to Ethan. Okay. Ethan, you're up.
Thank you. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. Presentation mode. Good afternoon, Mayor Venice and City Councilors. I'm Ethan Nelson, the city's Intergovernmental Relations Officer, and today we're reviewing proposed revisions to the IGR operating agreements, which provide a framework for IGR committee operations. We are seeking your input and approval for the proposed changes, and at a further meeting, staff will bring back a resolution amending the operating agreements and incorporating any changes that come out of today's discussion. Our agenda is pretty straightforward. I'll give a history and update on the current status of the IGR operating agreements, share the revision rubric that was part of your council packet, walk through each section to explain what the revision is and the corresponding rationale, and wrap up with the IGR committee's actions on the items. The current council operating agreements includes an IGR operating agreement from 2008. So it's been a bit of time since about 15 years since we have worked on that. Council adopted Resolution 5081 in 2013 as a pilot process. The focus was on efficiency and prioritization of city resources. While this resolution provided much of the direction for the IGR committee operations, it was never formally incorporated into an updated operating agreement. Additionally, over the past decade, organizational processes and resources have shifted, impacting IGR operations. For example, grant review, bill review, and prioritization and communications. These changes are included in the proposed revisions. And as you may remember, over the course of the past 2 years, during annual IGR agenda setting work sessions, the council has requested a few different communication and engagement activities from the IGR committee and myself. So I'm going to dive on into, in addition to the AIS for this work session, the packet included 3 attachments. Attachment A is a copy of the 2013 resolution, number 5081. Attachment B is a memo to the IGR committee, which outlines the proposed changes and provides a rubric on the rationale for each category of proposed revisions, and that was for their September 5th meeting. That's earlier this month. And attachment C is a legislative copy of the proposed IGR operating agreements with the revisions outlined. This slide provides an overview of the rationale for each category proposed change. Gray is coded as the direction in Resolution 5081, and as was shared previously, it was never been codified. Green denotes proposed changes based on the existing operating processes. And lastly, yellow represents the communications revisions requested by City Council in 2021 and 2022. We're now going to move into reviewing the proposed changes by section. In Section 1, the purpose of Council, Committee, and Intergovernmental Operations. By 2016, after internal review of the city charter and discussions with the city attorney and city manager, the role of the IGR committee as grant review approval body was deemed redundant. And as a committee, the decision was made to stop the grant review process and focus available time on state legislative and federal policy and relational efforts. At any time, any city grant can be pulled by the IGR committee or by a council member for discussion and review. Additionally, the IGR officer continues to coordinate large-scale grant application efforts across the organization and the department budget managers with support from the finance division and manages all grants for fiscal accountability. So that function's still there moving forward. Section 8, changes in Section 8 reflect changes to the Oregon Legislature's calendar. For example, back in 2008, there was not annual sessions. Now there are, so we needed to update some of that. Additionally, there's edits for greater flow and removing of some of the historical narrative that was incorporated into the document. Moving forward, Section 9, for the process for introducing legislation. Proposed revisions on both editorial for flow and clarity and also updates based on Resolution 5081's intention for a streamlined legislative advocacy process. Specifically, after receiving policy direction from the IGR committee and city council, the city manager and designee work to implement that policy. As bills are written and revised, staff works across the organization with the city attorney's office, with legislative council, and also with other organizations to advocate for a bill that would implement the policy direction provided by city council. Section 10 is the largest revision in the document. The proposed change takes the legislative review and prioritization process that was adopted in Resolution 5081 in 2013 and replaces the process from the existing 2008 operating agreements. Section 11, like Section 10, Section 11 is a replacement of the 2008 process with that outlined in 2013. Additionally, Resolution 5081 created the voting on bills as its own section, hence the addition of this new version of the operating agreements. While the previous slide identified the replacement of the 2008 process with the 2013 process, we're also proposing operational revisions to the 2013 process that align with current practices and Council's recently adopted strategic goals, specifically adopting streamlined and efficient processes. The first revision aligns with current practice for IGR committee voting on bill position and priority, where a unanimous, a 3-0 votes on bills are included within the IGR officer's regular bill summary updates, and non-unanimous votes are moved for discussion with City Council. Additionally, approved IGR minutes will be provided as part of the weekly council materials when available. And lastly, remove the process, which was never used, of emailing full city council for input on non-unanimous bill votes by the IGR committee. We saw this as conflicting with public meetings law and was also not meeting the council's strategic goal for increasing transparency and trust in council and staff. Section 12, as many of you may recall, in past IGR committee agenda work sessions, city councilors requested additional communication efforts between the committee, the IGR officer, and the city council. The IGR committee addressed those interests and approved new processes which were adopted by city council in 2022. Section 12 of the revised operating agreements codify and clarify those processes. Section 14, consistent with what we've discussed at the outset, this section clarifies within the operating agreements the role and responsibilities, the revised role and responsibilities related to grant review. So that was all of the revisions. Moving on into IGR committee. So at their September meeting, the IGR committee reviewed, discussed, and ultimately adopted the recommended revisions to the IGR operating agreements in a unanimous vote. We noticed the incongruent elements in Section 11 after the early September meeting and made the September 21st revisions that were addressed today. Prior to this meeting, I called each IGR committee member and the mayor to discuss the September 21st revisions so they could speak to those today if they choose to. And lastly, we are seeking feedback and approval for these revisions to the IGR operating agreements. If you support this action, the next step would be for the city attorney's office to draft a resolution based on the draft in attachment C and bring that back to a future council meeting as part of the consent agenda. Thank you for your time. I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and that's back to you, Mayor Venus, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Ethan. And I have Emily in the queue, but I had understood that Greg might want to speak first. So as the chair of the IGR, I'm going to let him speak first. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to add a couple of points to Ethan's presentation. As the IGR committee, we met on September 5th and reviewed the proposed revisions to the IGR committee operating agreements as was just presented. We voted unanimously to approve the recommendations and to move to the full city council with the recommendation to approve. The IGR manager reached out to each IGR member earlier this week and to discuss the additional items that were identified in our September 21st revisions. And after discussing this with Ethan, the rationale for the changes, I'm in favor of and fully support the changes as presented.
Okay, thank you. Emily.
Very simple question. What does it mean to be a standing committee since it's the only one?
I would ask Catherine to weigh in on that.
They're the ones that are, the standing committees are the ones that are identified specifically in your code. Those are different than what would be an ad hoc committee. For example, the ad hoc committee on police policy, that was something that you convened as a council, but it had a set time of which it would disperse. All of your standing committees remain in place unless you amended your code to delete them or end them.
Well, it says that this time it is the only standing committee of the city council. And I think the mayor picks them for a year as the other commissions are chosen for a year, or if they have an extended term and the ones we vote on. So I guess I don't really understand what the difference is, why the other commissions aren't standing.
I apologize. It's the only standing committee of the council. I apologize that the distinction I think that you're asking about. There's no other committee or commission that's solely composed of council members that is ongoing. Okay. Does that answer your question? I apologize. The other standing committees and commissions are of community members and volunteers. So.
But then they're not standing.
They are standing. They continue on. They don't end. The statement that this is the only standing committee of the council, another way of saying that would be IGR is the only standing committee entirely composed of councilors.
Well, maybe we should say that. If the other committees really are standing. Thanks.
Okay, Matt.
Thanks, Mayor. I just, as someone who has served on IGR in the past, and is wholly interested in policy work, and advocating at county, state, and federal level, I wish that this committee was the only standing committee of council that included all councilors. I recognize, and I'll let my colleagues speak to, maybe some of their frustrations about longing to either fully digest the information or participate. But I long for increased IGR engagement, and I don't know if it's quarterly or an opportunity for council as a whole to have more touch points, but also recognize that, Ethan, you're doing yeoman's work and you're doing stellar work, and I don't want to overtax or burden staff. I see an opportunity for greater engagement. And all that being said, I don't know, and I'm going to seek clarification when a motion comes up, if I need to even announce my employment or recuse myself if there's an opportunity to advance our full adoption of the proposed agreements, but I do work in the Oregon legislature in addition to obviously serving on council. So, all that being said, I look forward to hearing my colleagues' thoughts, and I appreciate and welcome the IGR committee's recommendations. I would just love more touch points with council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alan and then Randy.
Yeah, I've expressed my displeasure with this process in the past. I don't like our IGR process. If you're not on the IGR committee, and I was on the IGR committee, you really I feel isolated from the whole process. It used to be that we would discuss legislation and bills with the whole council a heck of a lot more than we do now, which is never. And that provided us with the opportunity, as Matt was talking about, where we get touch points, but where we could all provide input. Having to respond to a report or an email via email is not even close to the same thing. So since that doesn't really happen anymore, I'm a no vote on this in the absence of any real change to make this more inclusive with more engagement with the council.
Okay, thank you. Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly understand the longing for more engagement on this, but like with all of our subcommittees, our subgroups, I mean, there are only so many hours in the day. We can't all be involved in everything that's going on in city government. The main purpose of this process right now is we're trying to modernize and bring our current operating agreements in line in the form that we have now, not looking at rechanging the form of the IGR committee, but just taking what we have now and trying to modernize the language. For example, there was a piece in there where meeting minute notes were brought back to the council for approval, even though that wasn't happening. Well, I mean, I personally don't like to vote on minutes that I haven't been at a meeting to hear what was said. So it's just some obsolete things like that that we were trying to address. Personally, I think if we're going to come back and look at a larger rethinking of how our intergovernmental relations system works, I think that almost needs to be another work session that's targeted with that, where we could look at how some other communities handle this process and try and see, is there a better way, a more inclusive way to provide for this? But, again, right now, we're just trying to work with the system that's in place. Our intent is not to try and recreate a whole new system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this? Greg.
I understand councilors' frustration around this, and I've been on council for 10 years, and there's been times when I wasn't involved in IGR, but I was involved in other things external to the council, including LOC and National League of Cities, which I come back and report on those conversations and discussions anyway. But the thing that I would suggest would be a way for us to move this forward in terms of the issue of inclusivity and broadening the discussion would be for us to bring this back at our council retreat coming up the first of the year, and then discuss at that point with some recommendations possibly from League of Oregon Cities about best practices that other cities are taking in terms of IGR, how IGR committees are composed, how councils in other parts of the state are dealing with state level and federal level issues, and see if there is a better mousetrap that we can build.
Okay, thank you for that. With that, are we ready for a vote to approve these updates to the IGR agreement? Can I have a motion on the table?
Thank you, Mayor. Move to approve the proposed changes outlined in Attachment C and to direct the city manager to place an upcoming consent agenda Let me start over. Move to approve the proposed changes outlined in attachment C and to direct the city manager to place on an upcoming consent agenda a resolution adopting the updated operating agreements.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 1. I see, looks like 6 in favor, all opposed? And 2, 3, okay, that doesn't add up. Okay, 2 opposed. Got it. Okay.
And a paw.
And a paw, right.
Yeah.
Mayor
2.1.
and Mayor, I received confirmation that my approval or disapproval of the process doesn't have any financial impact, positive or negative. So hence why I participated.
That's great. Okay. Thank you for double checking. And thank you all for a good discussion. And you've gotten another 14 minutes back in your day. So thank you all. With that, we are adjourned.